So recently, Diego Lopez came out and said that he would like to face off against Alexander Volkanovski later on this year in December. And I think that this would be a very interesting matchup, if I'm just being completely honest. Who wouldn't like to see Diego Lopez face off against the former champion in the featherweight division? That would be an amazing fight. It would be a very, very entertaining fight. But I just have to go ahead and be honest with each and every single one of you guys when I say that I think that Alexander Volkanovski would clear Diego Lopez. Now, I know I'm probably going to get a whole lot of hate for saying that, but I really do honestly believe that Alexander Volkanovski is more than capable than beating someone like Diego Lopez. Let me just say this. I love Diego Lopez. I love watching him perform. He's a great fighter. I think that, whenever he came into the UFC scene, fighting Movsar Evloev in his first fight in the UFC, it was a great showing on where he is skill wise, and I knew that he was going to put on great performances. Couple years later, he's in a fight winning streak, and he's been highly active in the UFC, a fan favorite, and let me just say this: his last fight against Brian Ortega, in my opinion, wasn't that great of a win, and I'll tell you guys exactly why. Before Brian Ortega faced off against Diego Lopez, Brian Ortega pretty much said that win or lose, he was going to move to the lightweight division. Now, say what you want to say about that, but I feel like that could be a compromise mentally on how Ortega pretty much prepared for that matchup against Diego Lopez. Because even we saw the fight at UFC in the Sphere. It looked like Brian Ortega wasn't that good. He wasn't really waking up in the fight, and Diego Lopez was able to clear him pretty much throughout the entire matchup. So in my opinion, I really don't think that that was that good of a win. And even before that, Brian Ortega was an inactive fighter. Even with that win over Yair Rodriguez, there was rumors about Brian Ortega potentially getting removed from the rankings because he just hadn't fought in a long time, and there was a lot of fighters that were coming up, and everybody was questioning why Brian Ortega was still highly ranked in the featherweight division. So yeah, the situation with Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez was an interesting situation, but Diego Lopez did his thing. He absolutely did his thing, ladies and gentlemen. He absolutely seized the moment. He took advantage of that opportunity and he came out with a win. You can't be mad at Diego Lopez for doing so, but that is a very interesting situation for Diego Lopez because more or less he got gifted a ranking. Arrest me, go ahead and type the comments in the comment section below. That's what it seems like to me, and if you're honest with yourself, you would probably agree to the same thing. But essentially, he didn't beat a guy who was on a roll, or anything in the UFC. This guy was previously inactive. He only had like 2 wins in, like, I don't know how many freaking years, and he was pretty much making his way out of the division. So I really don't consider a win over Brian Ortega like a crazy win for Diego Lopez, if I'm just being completely honest. And I mean, if we just look at the resumes, in my opinion, I just feel like Alexander Volkanovski has just fought the better quality fighters. I just feel like Diego Lopez is probably just going to scratch the surface on what it truly means to fight or share the octagon with, the elite of the elites. And we'll see how he performs. We'll definitely see how Diego Lopez performs against someone like Alexander Volkanovski. He might even shut me up, But and as it stands right now, if I'm just being completely honest, I really do feel like Alexander Volkanovski would probably clear Diego Lopez. If I'm just being completely 100% honest with each and every single one of you guys, I really do feel like Alexander Volkanovski would beat Diego Lopez. And that's just coming from someone who is a fan of Diego Lopez as well. I do feel like, if we see Diego Lopez versus Alexander Volkanovski, I'm just going to go ahead and favor Alexander Volkanovski to win that matchup. I guess for the sake of argument, it's really a lot of uncertainty, in my opinion. I really don't feel like Diego Lopez, is a fighter that, in my opinion, is completely convincing me that he would perform well against someone like Alexander Volkanovski. And we could just pretty much look at the resume here. Look, Gavin Turner was nowhere near the rankings when he fought him. Pat Sabatini was nowhere near the rankings when he fought him. I think Sadiq Youssef was like ranked 14 or something when he fought him. Dan Ige, of course, is like ranked 14th right now, so he's like barely scratching the surface of what it means to actually be a ranked fighter. And Brian Ortega, like I've been saying this entire video, he had a very specific situation going on uh with his career in the featherweight division. And in my opinion, I just don't really think that his resume screams elite fighter yet. In my opinion, I mean, there's a whole bunch of fighters here in the featherweight division right now that we don't know whether or not someone like Diego Lopez would have performed well against him. I would have loved to see Diego Lopez fight someone like Bryce Mitchell. I would have liked to see him fight someone like Calvin Cater, this Aljamain Sterling, hell, even Arnold Allen. There is a lot of guys here that, we're probably never going to see Diego Lopez fight, at least in the near future, because Diego Lopez just had a crazy situation going on for himself when he was offered the fight with Brian Ortega. And look, like I said, shout out to Diego Lopez. He did what he had to do. He seized the moment, he took advantage of the opportunity, but I don't think that Diego Lopez is going to look to fight down. He's not in a situation right now where he is going to be looking to fighting down at all. So I really don't think that Diego Lopez is probably going to take a fight with some of the fighters that I just mentioned. I think that some of these fighters are probably going to try to call him out, because there's a lot of uncertainty on whether or not Diego Lopez is actually good enough to be in the rank where he is right now. I mean, just above him is Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski, and those two guys, have been tried and proven in the featherweight division. I mean, Alexander Volkanovski, of course, beat Max Holloway a number of times, and of course, Max Holloway has just been on a tear, in the featherweight division for a while now. So, in my opinion, I feel like Diego Lopez still has a lot to prove in the featherweight division. There's nobody right now in his resume that would just you could just look at this win and say that, oh, Diego Lopez is really, really, really that guy. And that's just me being completely honest, man. Like I said, I'm a fan of Diego Lopez. I think that he's extremely entertaining. He's been extremely active in the UFC. Um, but like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I just don't think that his resume speaks eliteness, if I'm just being completely honest. If he would have gotten a win over someone like Arnold Allen, or if he would have gotten a win over someone, like in the lower rankings, I guess, like Aljamain Sterling, even someone like Calvin Cater, then I would be like, okay, Diego Lopez could potentially be the next champion. But the way that I see it right now, I don't think that Diego Lopez would beat someone like Alexander Volkanovski, if I'm just being completely honest. And yeah, of course, Diego Lopez does have that one good performance against Movsar Evloev, but he still ended up losing that fight. But all I'm really saying is that at the top of the division, everyone can crack, everyone can grapple, everyone's smart, but are they at that level? Are they at that championship level? You can really only say that about maybe just a couple of fighters. Of course, Max Holloway, Ilya Taporia, and right now Alexander Volkanovski. I don't know if Diego Lopez could be in that conversation because he hasn't been tested. I mean, he hasn't really been tested. He beat Brian freaking Ortega. And who hasn't beat Brian Ortega? And I know what some of you guys are already gonna say down in the comments that, oh, Alexander Volkanovski has been knocked out twice in his last two fights. Like, this dude is washed. He's old. He needs to retire. Like, I get what you guys are saying, but look, he had a week and a half to prepare for Islam Makhachev, arguably the most complete fighter in the UFC right now, and it's just something that you don't do. You don't take a short notice fight against one of the best fighters in the entire MMA scene right now. That was a big mistake on Alexander Volkanovski's part. And credit to Ilya Taporia. I do think that he made Alexander Volkanovski make some mistakes in that fight. Credit to Ilya Taporia. I know I've been very, very critical of Ilya in the past, but going back and watching some of those fights, I really do think that Ilya Taporia outwitted and out tactic. I guess he just had a better tactical plan against Alexander Volkanovski, and I do think that that fight does need to be credited, for Ilya Taporia. No matter what's said about Ilya Taporia, but that's a different topic for a different video. But either way, I still feel like Alexander Volkanovski is more than capable than beating someone like Diego Lopez for the facts that I've been saying, through this entire video. Diego Lopez hasn't been tested against some other ranked fighters, and I think that he got lucky in the situation that he had against Brian Ortega, who was, again, pretty much making his way out of the division and was previously an inactive fighter. But I'm willing to hear the arguments that you guys have, so make sure you guys write them down in the comment section below. Do you guys think Diego Lopez would beat someone like Alexander Volkanovski? Do you guys think that this would be an easy fight for Alexander Volkanovski? Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. As always, it's a pleasure. Peace out and have a good one.